Hello again, I am Blunty, that's me there in the mirror. You regulars will have already seen this footage from my trip to London, where, amongst other things, I was testing the thing in my hand, which is the Glide Gear GNS 100 Geranos 3-axis Gimbal Stabiliser. Or possibly Geranos, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but that's how it's spelled right there. You tell me. Geranos or Geranos? I have no idea. However you're supposed to say it though, it is my new favourite gadget in my gear bag. Now, in the past, I've reviewed a few different 3-axis gimbals, all of which have been for small, light equipment, specifically GoPro cameras and smartphones and such, which is fantastic. In fact, I still use my GoPro one all the time. I love it. But this beastie is beefed up for big boy cameras, and I have been mainly using it with my Panasonic G7, which is an awesome mirrorless camera for video, and it shoots up to 4K, and it does so under a compelling price tag, but it has no stabilization built in at all, which means getting steady, smooth shots is always much more challenging than I would like it to be. Enter the Glide Gear GNS 100 Geranos Stabiliser. Briefly, if you're not familiar with what these things do and can't figure it out from what you've been seeing in the mirror, they have a team of sensors to detect orientation, and 3 servos to adjust for pitch, roll, and yaw, and 3 onboard computing microprocessors to extremely rapidly calculate how it needs to move those servos around to counteract the movement and keep the camera platform level. But the truth is, you really don't need to understand how it works, only that it does work, and as you can see for yourself, it does so really quite well. Throughout this video, I'll be showing a bunch of footage of various different kinds of camera moves and stable shots and pans and tilts and all that kind of stuff to show just how stable this thing actually is. It's powered by a pair of 18650 lithium-ion 2000 mAh 3.7 volt batteries, which will give you, believe it or not, around 6 hours of use. And in fact, the pair of batteries that came with it got me through each and every shooting day with plenty of power to spare. That figure does, however, rely heavily on you properly balancing the camera before use, as the better the camera is naturally balanced in the cradle, the less torque the motors have to apply to keep it level, and the less torque they have to apply to keep it level, the less power they use. The process of balancing the camera is straightforward, only requiring adjustment of the cradle using a completely toolless process, locking the cradle into place using thumb screws. It only takes a minute or two to set up and you're good to go for the rest of the day, basically. And as you may be able to see, I set mine up with a quick release plate in the proper position for this camera and the lens I was using, with the screen flipped out and everything, so I could quickly attach and remove the camera at will, without having to rebalance it every single time. And I have balanced everything on this, from my pocketable Sony RX100 right up to my Canon 70D DSLR, though with the heavier cameras like DSLRs, you'll want to be especially mindful of your choice of lens, as DSLR lenses tend to be quite heavy all on their own, not to mention long, which makes balancing trickier. A comparatively long, heavy lens like the utterly superb Sigma 18-35 on a Canon 70D will balance just fine, but the bulk of this setup, combined with how far back you need to slide it to balance the lens, is less than ideal, as it will start interfering with the range of movement you'll be able to get before it sort of bumps into itself. In use, the servos are very, very smooth and, more importantly, utterly silent, so you're never going to have any issues with even on-camera audio.
Literally 100 years of military history.
And interestingly, unlike every other gimbal I've tried, these servos have no hard rotational stops. They will in fact freely spin past a full rotation, all the way around and around and around and around, which is really very nice indeed. The stabilizer comes with a bespoke hard case, but to save on bulk, I've actually just been carrying it around just thrown directly into my gear bag, and it's been absolutely fine. It is built pretty damn solid, and it's never done crap like accidentally turning itself on inside the bag or anything and draining the battery while I wasn't looking. The control interface is basically identical to every other handheld stabilizer I've used. A little slightly fiddly thumbstick lets you make adjustments in any of 3 modes. The default mode just keeps the camera level, or at the angle you set it at with the thumbstick, and when turning it will smoothly pan the camera. The second mode locks the orientation, so regardless of what you do, the camera always points itself in the exact same direction. And lastly, the third mode will smoothly follow how you tilt and pan with the handle, but keeping the camera level. Between these 3 modes, you have a huge amount of control and possibilities for emulating shots that usually require much bulkier and heavier equipment, like jibs and cranes and sliders, and of course the humble tripod. Holding your camera out on a stick but retaining super smooth camera moves keeps you amazingly mobile, reactive, flexible. The trade-off is that without the extra support of a tripod or even a more traditional shoulder rig, you are of course carrying all of that weight with your arms all of the time. The Stabiliser itself weighs about a kilo with batteries installed. Add to that whatever your camera and lens combo weighs, and it is slightly more tiring shooting this way than with a basic shoulder rig, for example, but you are far more flexible and get a much wider range of shots and angles while keeping smooth and stable. So it is something I'm more than happy to deal with. Glide Gear do in fact also provide their horn camera mount to offer you a way of addressing this, but while it does indeed better distribute the weight of the rig, personally I didn't wind up using it as I found it restricted my flexibility a bit too much, but it's nice to have that option. The unit also has Bluetooth built in for connection to a smartphone app where you can control the roll and pitch and yaw of the rig remotely, giving you a fully remote controlled motion camera rig, which introduces some very interesting opportunities. From the app, you can also calibrate the gimbal should you ever need to. So all that said and done, in the field, in the real world, the Glide Gear GNS 100 Geranos 3-axis gimbal stabilizer is, in a word, excellent. The long and the short of it is it makes my shooting life much easier and simpler. I can get nice, smooth, stable shots faster and easier and with much less setup than ever before. Even the basic walk and talk handheld self-shot stuff is vastly improved by the Geranos. For the last few event shoots I've done, including throughout my recent London trip, which is where most of the footage you're seeing has come from, and the EB Expo Games Convention, it was literally the only piece of support gear I bought. It was just my camera, my microphone, and this. And I never once regretted that decision. I shot all day long without ever needing a battery change, and it was so effective at one point I was even dual wielding, shooting 2 cameras at once, one in each hand. The G7 on the gimbal in one hand, shooting mid-range, and my iPhone in my other hand, getting the wide shots. And even zoomed in, shooting one-handed, with my attention split between framing up and tracking moving subjects with 2 different cameras, and in fact sometimes pointed in 2 entirely different directions. The GNS 100 Geranos Stabiliser delivered remarkably steady shots, and all without nailing me down to a single spot, as a tripod would have, for example. I was freely mobile at all times. It was wonderful. No other piece of gear I own or have ever used could have let me do that. Currently it's listed at $7.99 US dollary dues, not exactly an impulse buy, but it is certainly an investment I doubt many pro and aspirational shooters will regret. It is a superb bit of equipment that will serve you extremely well in many, many different kinds of shoots. And of course it is a device that can move with you through many camera upgrades as well. So there you go, let me know what you think in my down below area. I am Blunty, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.